Lusa Bokbin, well, the picture doesn't look good from what he tells us, and especially from 2025, it's going to be tougher. We'll continue that conversation today. We are getting over the telephone line to speak to Dr. Abudu Abdul Ganiu. He's a technical advisor at the Office of the Finance Minister, Dr. Amin Adam. He'll be joining us over the telephone line in a bit. He's joined us. Good morning to you, Doc. Thank you for joining us here on the Morning Star.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Great. So let's start the conversation off from the 6.9% growth in the second quarter. For many people, they would wonder, what does this mean to me as an ordinary Ghanaian? 6.9% growth.
Yes, so what that means is that general economic activity is improving in terms of what we produce, and once we continue to produce as an economy, then you're also talking about more jobs being created. And once more jobs are being created, then you are putting money in the pockets of people. So generally, that is what the growth of an economy means. At the end of the day, you are able to generate a lot more economic activity, which then enhances or increases value of whatever you are producing, and eventually that will result in the creation of more jobs, putting a lot more money in the pockets of Kenyans. So that's basically what economic growth is. So anytime the economy is growing, it is simply indicative of people's lives improving, because jobs are created, incomes are being increased, and all of that, then obviously that enhances the quality of life of Kenyans. So that's just what it means.
And from what we understand, the main drivers of the growth, according to what the Ghana Statistical Service mentioned, are mining and quarrying, as well as crops and information and communication, construction and manufacturing. They were the main drivers of the growth in the period under review. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yes, there are three main sectors of the economy. So it is the aggregate of the growth across the three sectors that results in the overall. So if you look at the 6.9 growth, for example, we are told that industry grew by 9.3%. So, of course, industry then leads, if you want, the pack of three sectors of the economy in terms of growth. But also significant is the fact that agriculture has grown by 5.4%. And then you're talking about services that has also grown by 5.8%. So that is indicative that all the three sectors of the economy are growing, but of course, that has been largely led by industry. And the reason this is significant is that if you look at the growth figures for 2023, for the first, second, and third quarters, industry did not grow at all. In some cases, industry did shrink. It was in the last quarter of 2023 that we started seeing a growth in industry. So if that has been consistent into the second quarter, then it is highly significant, because really, once industry is growing, that is where a lot more jobs can be created, because then you're talking about value addition, whatever, you're talking about producing a lot more that you can export, which then would be able to bring in a lot more foreign and all of that. So it is highly significant. So even though industry is leading the pack at 9.3%, but the other two sectors have equally grown, which is very, very significant for the economy.
And in general terms, consistently government has been saying that we have turned the corner. Do these latest figures point to that assertion that indeed we have turned the corner?
That's clearly what it demonstrates, because if you look at by mid-year of 2023, we were able to now see a certain signal of a turnaround of the economy. And we announced that in the 2023 budget. There were many who thought that we hadn't turned the corner, but we were sticking to the indicators at that time, that the fact that they are beginning to look good and the fact that we can all trust the trajectory going forward, then we believe that the economy has really turned the corner. And if you look at all the projections that we made for the year 2023, for example, we either met those targets or we even exceeded those particular targets. The growth target for 2023 was 1.5%. By mid-year, as a result of how well the economy was doing, we revised that to 2.3%. By end of 2023, the economy had grown by about 2.9%. And as we speak, in fact, our growth target for even 2024 was supposed to be 2.8%. But as we speak, we have had to revise that together with the IMF and all our development partners for about 2%. So if in the second quarter we are already doing 6.9%, I have no doubt that by end of the year, we certainly would have gone beyond what we have targeted for 2024, so as far as growth of our economy is concerned. So if we have been this consistent over the period, it only proves that indeed the economy has turned a corner. I mean, we all knew the difficulties that we went through in 2019, 2020, and up to about 2022. So during COVID and then the aftermath of COVID, where our economy really reeled, but by 2023, we succeeded in bringing down inflation to about 35% by the year of end of 2023. We actually brought inflation down to about 22-23%. And as you are aware, aside from the growth figures that are looking so positive, inflation has trended downwards since April of 2024. And today we are talking about a 20.4 rates of inflation. So it is this kind of macroeconomic stability that has been restored, which has become consistent, that is beginning to impact on the growth figures that we are seeing today. So indeed, the economy has long turned the corner, and perhaps we are on our way to registering those pre-COVID levels that sort of brought so much relief to this economy and to all Ghanaians before COVID struck and all the attendant economic problems that we have started to undergo. So I think the signs at this point are looking so good for our country.
But one of the major concerns is with the agricultural sector. Yes, it's seen a growth, but then again, specifically in the area of cocoa, it has contracted for the fourth consecutive quarter by 26.2%. What exactly is the challenge, and how concerning is that? How concerning is that for government?
I think to speak to the cocoa box, for example, and tell you about that doesn't seem to be under control, and that has significantly impacted on the outputs of cocoa. So we totally agree, and I know that measures are being pursued just to ensure that these problems are remedied. And once that is done with the right investments, we all look at to cocoa production picking up. You look at the price, for example, that has been announced, one of the highest we've recorded in our history. And the expectation is that should spur more production going forward. So I totally agree that the cocoa sector has been challenged over the period, that all stakeholders within the sector have not gone to sleep, are working extremely hard to turn that particular situation indication around.
And is this growth that we have seen for the second quarter, is it the expectation that the trajectory will continue?
Yeah, basically that's what it is. As I told you, the projection for this year was around 2.9%. Revised that to 3.2%. So that tells us our optimism as far as the group economy is concerned. I mean, these are actuals that we are seeing, but our own growth projection was that conservative, at 3.2%. And looking at the signals so far, there's every indication that our economy will grow beyond what we targeted for 2024. So yes, there's a conservative projection, but measures that are being put in place to ensure that we spare growth at the end of the year, we should be able to achieve a much higher growth than what we have targeted. And that goes for all the other economic indicators. For example, in terms of inflation, our projection for the year is 15 plus or minus 2. So we could actually be doing somewhere between 13% up to about 17% in the year. But if inflation is currently at 20.4%, there's every indication that we should be able to achieve that particular target or even better. We are in a season that is supposed to be farming season, but of course we understand that droughts have been recorded in some parts of the country. But why not? If the rains do come, for example, in the month of October, we should expect some bumper harvest going forward. Government has also put in place some other measures so that the agricultural sector does not suffer and all of that. So if the growth figure in the agricultural sector is currently around 5.4%, and hopefully the droughts do not affect the sector, then it means that by end of the year, that sector should also grow even higher. And services have always grown. In fact, in the last 3 to 4 years, the services sector has basically led our growth. And we are expecting services to continue to grow at that particular level. So I think that going forward, there's every indication that our economy is beginning to look better. Macroeconomic stability has been restored, and we are beginning to see the impact that it is going to have on the growth of the economy.
All right. So away from the economy and how it is performing, let's talk about issues relating to the impact the domestic debt exchange or what the debt exchange program in general is having on people. We've had some of the investors complain about how it has left them worse off because they are unable to get access to their funds, among others. How generally is government managing how this exchange, domestic or the debt exchange program in general, is affecting people? How is it being managed? Because this is through no fault of theirs. They invested and they seem to be at the receiving end of the consequences.
Yes, I think from where we sit, all of us can say that we have been able to reach a final agreement. So as far as the domestic debt exchange program is concerned, that agreement has been reached, it's final, and everyone accepts the terms. Looking at the timelines that were given for people to sign up, to agree to the terms of the exchange. So that has been done. Now, what is left is government commitment of ensuring that any time payment, for example, have to be made based on the schedule, then government honors that. And indeed, since 2023, government has met all the commitments. I think the last bullet payment that was made was around July of some 5 or so billion Ghana cedis. So any time payments are supposed to be made in respect of the exchange, government has met that particular commitment going forward. We totally agree that for many who have their money in various investments and were expecting a certain amount of return, now that the returns have been reduced, obviously that is going to affect plans, that is going to affect people's ways of life, so on and so forth. And we totally accept the pain that these people may be going through. But these things were necessary. I mean, perhaps given those difficulties or those challenges, without a debt exchange, whether it's domestic or external, where will our economy have been headed? That's the question we needed to ask ourselves. I mean, were we ready to sacrifice something to save this economy? Or we should have just been on that bus or that train, and then all of a sudden we are headed to a point where we cannot return. So we needed that, and people have accepted that. Currently we are at the verge of finalizing the external debt restructuring. We have reached various agreements at the level of the OCC, the Creditor Committee. As we speak, the finance minister is expected to lead a delegation to France for us to work out agreements with each of the bilateral countries. And then 2 weeks ago, we did put out a structure of exchange as far as the Eurobonds are concerned. People are still responding, and we're hoping that by the 30th of this month, for example, we should have more than 10% of the structure that has been put out. So that would have also brought to a conclusion the restructuring of the Eurobonds. Then the last leg would be the pure commercial restructuring. So external suppliers or external contractors. When we put out contractors, people thought that we're dealing or we're talking about contractors. But talking about external suppliers that government has pulled over the years. They are also part of the restructuring program that we have to do externally. So all of these things are being brought to a conclusion. And once we do that, the signal that it will begin to give to the market that Ghana is credit worthy. We begin to have various credit rating agencies now beginning to look at Ghana as a place for investments. And perhaps if mistakes were made in the past, we make sure we learn from it. We do not make those mistakes going forward. And at the end of the day, the economy becomes more robust. So that's basically what I can say as far as the restructuring, whether domestic or external, is concerned.
Now, you mentioned that mistakes, if mistakes were made, lessons will be learned. One would say that what is the guarantee that lessons will be learned? Because, at the start of the administration, there was an IMF program, and the president, for instance, assured that that was going to be our very last IMF program that we sign on to. Here we are under another IMF program. So, what is the guarantee that we are learning lessons from some of these decisions we have taken in the past?
So I'm sure you're referring to the current IMF program, where the president would have said that lessons and possibly this should be our last IMF program. That's what you're talking about.
I didn't hear you clearly. The connection to you. So if you can kindly reposition. Yes, kindly proceed.
Is it better now?
Yes, it's much better.
All right. So I'm just saying that, are you talking about the current IMF program and whatever lessons we have learned, or you're talking about the program before this one, whatever lessons we're supposed to learn, which we have learned or didn't learn?
So it's both. So I'm saying that you mentioned that whatever be the case, if there are any lessons to be learned, it will be learned, and then we'll ensure that we don't find ourselves in this situation again, where we even have to embark on a domestic exchange program or even seek IMF support. And I'm saying that what is the guarantee that we will learn? Because in 2017, the president, when he took over, at the time we were under an IMF program, correct? And he indicated that this was going to be our last. That was going to be our last. And here we are again under another IMF program. So I'm asking, what is the guarantee that we are learning?
Yes, exactly. I mean, the intention certainly then was right. And I'm not sure there was anything particularly done wrong that possibly got us to the IMF program again. I know that anytime we talk about COVID, for example, people think that it's overflogged, but let's face it. Let's face it. If you look at the growth of our economy, we're doing an average of about 6% up to about 2019, and then 2020 COVID struck. So obviously it affected the entire global economy. Ghana wasn't an exception. If you had an economy that possibly grew by just about 0.5% in the COVID year, that tells you the impact that COVID certainly had on the economy. There's no two ways about that. And other reports from various international organizations does indicate that the impact of COVID on the global economy can only be compared to the Great Depression. And I always refer people to that. Go and read about the Great Depression, what happened at the time, the impact it had on the economy, how long it took the world basically to come out of that. So if you look at everything that pointed to why we had to embark on an IMF program this time around, it is certainly because of the effects of COVID and the economic impact that it had even when the world had overcome COVID itself. So that no one can deny. So under the circumstance, we believe that even if we could have been a little more prudent, so as far as our fiscal consolidation measures are concerned, then those perhaps are some of the lessons we can learn, so that if these things are things that are within our control, we make sure we deal with those things first. Then we pray that we are not hit by another pandemic or any global crisis, that Ghana equally is going to be affected, because those ones, you don't have any control over that.
But Doc, one of the reactions to the COVID element and the Russia-Ukraine war, among others, is that, yes, COVID did play a role, but then again, you mentioned that people feel that the issue is overflogged, and they argue that already we were in some form of crisis before COVID hit, and that is why the effect was so grave on us. And beyond that, many analysts have said that if we had taken the decision to go to the IMF early, or taking advantage of some other initiatives like the debt service suspension program or initiative, it would have probably lessened the burdens we are going through now, and perhaps we may not have needed to have undergone a debt exchange program.
Well, so that's what I'm saying. I have not fully concluded that COVID is entirely the reasons why we have to go for the IMF program and what some of the challenges have been. But the question to ask is, those other challenges that people talk about, will that have been enough to take us to the IMF, right? So in effect, without COVID, we possibly could have managed ourselves. We could have managed, the situation out of whatever challenges they were domestically. That is the point. So the coming of COVID, the impact it had on the economy certainly aggravated the situation. And that will leave you with no choice than to seek external help. And that is what we did. And if people are talking about other choices, for example, that we could have made, yes, I agree. But at the end of the day, what is the advantage for going for an IMF program? One of the advantages is the money you get from the IMF directly. Over the fund period, for example, we're talking about $3 billion that is supposed to come into the economy. And currently we've done, I think, about 2 or so billion.
And that is the same amount in which we lose to corruption every year.
Well, these are other issues. I don't know that. I don't know how we can appropriate the figures in terms of corruption and say we are losing 2 billion. Perhaps we need some hardcore facts and data to support.
Well, that is according to the Ghana Integrity Initiative. That consistently, that's what we lose.
So that's fine. That's what I'm saying. We need to understand what that methodology is, how they arrive at those figures. But I'm not too sure that is an argument I want to engage in. The significant point I want to make is that the IMF program provides us some $3 billion that we probably would not have gotten from other initiatives. That goes to support our budget year on year. So it is very good. So we have to weigh all the options. And at the end of the day, the best option for Ghana was for an IMF program.
All right.
And as we continue to get that relief, it provides significant budgetary support for our economy. But let me conclude on this point. Yes, when I talk about the COVID situation, people's skin is overflowed, and sometimes you hear the argument that even with COVID, we got so much money. Let's think about it this way. For a lot of private sector organizations that were affected by COVID, for example, if they were supposed to be raking in some income, some revenues, they did lose, didn't they? They all lost to that effect. So it's not just about what the government was expecting in terms of revenue that it got or didn't get, but we also look at the impact that it had on the private sector, because all of that feed into the growth of our economy, feed into the development of our country. So if shops are going to be closed, if people were going to lay off jobs and all of that, that is the impact we are talking about. So people should not just look at central government and whatever revenues that came into the kitty. That's not the point at all. Today, we've just discussed economic growth. The reason we are at 6.9%, the private sector plays a major role in that regard. So if COVID struck and people were not going to work, jobs were lost, or people were laying off other workers, so on and so forth, it is the general impact on the economy that we are looking at. But, as I've said, we have weathered the storm, and today we are where we are, and everybody can see the trajectory going forward being very, very positive for our economy.
Now, let me take you back to the issue of the debt exchange program and the reactions that have come on the back of it. For instance, I think since yesterday, one person has been trending, which is Michael Blackson, Ghanaian American comedian, who has been complaining, who took to X to complain bitterly about the debt exchange program. He's been given the option of either a 37% cut with 11 years maturity date, or 1.9% with 15 years maturity date. We've also heard from other people relating to what this is having on them. What are you doing in relation to the concerns being raised? And are you also worried that this also will have some form of impact on the image of the country as in terms of an option for investment?
Well, I think investment decisions and whatever the outcomes are, we have to understand that they come with some form of risks. Ghana will not be the only country, or if you want an investment house, for example, where you put in your money and at some point you lose, at some point you gain, that sort of thing. It's quite normal so as far as investment decisions and the outcomes is concerned. As I said earlier, it is not good for anyone to think that I should be raking in returns, but at some point it turn out to be losses. But investment generally comes with that. So he is coming from America, and I know obviously he should tell us. Some other investments in America, at some point, they do go bad as well. So that's the situation. But we agree that it comes with difficulties. And Ghana has gone about it in such a way that whatever the challenges or whatever the difficulties are, they are quite minimal. So the choices that we gave to investors under the Eurobond were two. So you accept a 37% haircut on the principal or on the stock, and then you are given a 5%, for example, interest over a period. You don't accept a haircut. You are giving your principal is intact, and then you receive 1.5, 1.9% over a period. So all that still means is that generally people have their investments. They have not totally lost. It's just the returns going forward that would have reduced quite significantly. But like I said, these are investment decisions, and sometimes they do happen. It could happen once in a blue moon, and unfortunately, they are the ones who have been caught in this particular situation. But as we improve, and as I have told you earlier, be more prudent with some of our fiscal consolidation measures. Going forward, Ghana should never find itself in this situation anymore. That's the only thing we can work towards.
And I asked about whether you think this may have any impact on the country's image, because he says Ghana stole his money. And this thing has been shared multiple times.
Yes, you see, not necessarily. Everything will come down to the credit rating agencies. And if you look at the likes of Standards and Poor, Fitch Rating and all others, the signal they are beginning to give is that the investment confidence in Ghana is returning. So when we have brought all of these debt restructuring to an end, obviously that will improve Ghana's credit rating, no doubt about that. And anybody going to the market, that is the first indicator the person looks out for. So it shows that there's confidence, it can be sustained, and once they put in their money, they are assured of whatever returns. So that's the only thing we can hope for, and that's what Ghana should be able to flock around if you want.
All right.
So once all of those debt restructuring issues come to an end, Ghana should look better to the investment community.
And there are concerns as well that once the program ends in 2026, 27, thereabouts, we are going to struggle, especially because the debt postponements that we have arranged are going to kick in around that time. What measures are being taken to address this issue? The finance minister has said in the past that they were going to put some monies aside to ensure that when the time comes for us to repay these debts, we will not suffer. If indeed that has been done, how much has accrued us so far?
Well, I think the most important thing is to look at the growth of the economy. And for all of us, we should be happy that the economy is beginning to grow and it's beginning to look very robust, because the major indicator you look out for is your debt to GDP ratio. So by the time the program ends, our target is to achieve a debt to GDP ratio of about 55%. So in that sense, it will tell that you have the capacity to borrow and you even have the capacity to pay back. But I believe going forward, we certainly are going to be quite slow so as far as contracting external debts, for example, is concerned. So all of these are the measures that I talked about in terms of lessons learned and what we have to be able to do going forward. And once all of that also comes on, and the credit rating that I talked about, if Ghana is beginning to look good, then it means that currently, if we are shut out of the international market, the bond market, for example, that gives us a leeway to go back to the market. So we would be able to go to the Eurobond market. We would be able to engage other external creditors, and they'll begin to look at Ghana as a positive place for any kind of investment.
All right.
So I do not foresee a struggle. I rather foresee a situation where once you end the program, you are assured of being on your own and having the capacity to really mobilize financing both externally and internally to be able to push the growth of the economy and push your development as well.
So are we putting money aside?
It's a matter that I cannot conclusively say. I know the discussions are still ongoing, and then let's see what happens. Perhaps in the next couple of months, maybe after the end of the year, government would have been very clear about whatever we have to do. But as I said, the most important thing is your growth. If you can, when you walk to the bank to borrow money, for example, they don't just give it to you because they like you,
Okay.
They love your face and all of that. At the end of the day, it's an assessment of your absorption capacity and then your ability to pay. That is what is more important. And for an economy, the most important indicator is that debt to GDP ratio figure. when it went beyond a certain level, it was clear that our debts were unsustainable. But under the IMF program, we are gradually bringing that down, and we should register about 55% even before the year 2026.
All right, Doc, just before I let you go, yesterday there were rumors circulating in the media that CBG had been sold. The Finance Ministry has issued a statement denying that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so basically that's what is it. I think we have to be very careful with what we put out there. I know that it's just a couple of perhaps months to elections, and people are going to see all these kind of fake stuff being put out. And what government will do is that once we see it, we will respond very quickly to that. So the response from CBG was quick. The response from the Ministry of Finance was quick, and I believe that should be able to quell that particular rumor. So CBG is under no consideration for a sale at all.
But it had liquidity challenges.
Well, banks have always had liquidity challenges. Sometimes it doesn't mean that at the end of the day it is headed for collapse or you have to necessarily sell it. So the BOG, working with government at all times, is going to find solutions to some of these challenges every now and then. So it's not a precarious situation at all, and CBG is under no consideration of a sale.
All right, Doc. Thank you very much for speaking to us. We're grateful for your time.
Thank you very much for having me this morning.
You had us engage Dr. Abudu Abdul Ganiu. He's a technical advisor at the Office of the Finance Minister. This is the Morning Star here on Star 103.5 FM. Very soon we'll just delve into our next conversation, and we'll be speaking to the people at Democracy Hub. They have been in the news. Let's find out what exactly the problem is.